Disclaimer: my YouTube channel Facts and Opinions is for entertainment purposes only. While I strive to provide engaging and informative content, it should not be considered a sole or definitive source of information. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and subscribe.
I'm Zach and this is Facts and Opinions. Here's a Filipino proverb: nothing destroys iron except its own rust. Interesting facts about the Philippines. The Philippines is an island nation in Southeast Asia. The Philippine archipelago is made up of 7,641 islands. Many Filipinos have Hispanic names because of a 19th century Spanish decree that required them to use Spanish surnames. The Philippine archipelagos in total cover about 115,831 square miles. Here's a reference to size compared to the US. And the Philippines is located along the Ring of Fire, a belt of active volcanoes and epicenters for earthquakes bordering the Pacific Ocean. US and Philippine relations. Before discussing directly the established relations between the United States and the Philippines, first we must revisit history beginning on April 21st, 1898, when the United States declared war on Spain. There were many reasons leading up to war, however, a major contributing factor was America's support of Cuba's ongoing struggle against Spanish rule. You see, there was much dissatisfaction with Spanish rule in Cuba, to include reasons such as corrupt Spanish politicians, lack of Cuban political representation in office, and high taxes. And with the mysterious explosion of the USS Maine, stationed in Havana Harbor at the time, the United States would embark on a war fought overseas. These campaigns involved Cuba and the Philippine Islands. Under the command of Commodore George Dewey on May 1st, 1898, the US Navy defeated the Spanish fleet guarding the Philippines. The Presidio, a U.S. Army post at the time located in San Francisco, was a strategic staging point because of its proximity to the finest harbor on the west coast, which was the San Francisco Bay, and had enough land to house and train large numbers of troops for service in the Philippines. About 80,000 men passed through this U.S. Army post at the time on their way to the Philippines. And interestingly enough, because of the poor living conditions for the troops dwelling at the Presidio, the military was soon prompted to improve troop facilities at the Presidio and military-wide. By the time most Presidio troops arrived at the islands, the fighting was still ongoing, but it was mainly involving Philippine guerrillas who were now waging the war. Their exiled leader at the time, Emilio Aguinaldo, was able to make contact with the attacking U.S. force headed already towards the Philippines, mistakenly believing that the U.S. would assist him and his insurrectos to gain independence from Spain. However, to the dismay of the Philippine nationalists, the United States decided to give Cuba independence and instead keep the Philippines after the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898. The desire for the United States to extend its influence across the Pacific further instigated the Philippine-American War, beginning on February 4, 1899. At the beginning of the outbreak, the U.S. had comparatively a small amount of troops against Aguinaldo's 40,000 men. On July 2, 1902, the war ended with U.S. victory, and American troops sent to the Philippines numbered around 75,000. After the Philippine-American War, tensions settled and 1935 marked the Commonwealth era, an 11-year transitional period in Philippine and U.S. history lasting till 1946. This was in preparation for independence from the United States, provided under the Philippine Independence Act, more popularly known as the Tydings-McDuffie Law. The Commonwealth era was interrupted when the Japanese launched an attack on the Philippines on December 8, 1941, just 10 hours after their attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The Japanese were known to mistreat Filipinos, to include actions of torture, forced hard labor, forcefully relocating young Filipino women into brothels, and murder. A testament to the brutality of the Japanese includes the Bataan Death March, where 76,000 sick and starving American and Filipino defenders in Bataan surrendered on the 9th of April, 1942, and were forced to march 65 miles toward Camp O'Donnell, which of course at the time, the POWs were ignorant of. Between 7,000 and 10,000 prisoners of war died due to sickness, starvation, execution, and even in captivity the torturing would only continue. The Japanese implemented a puppet government in Manila, the Philippine capital, run by Jose P. Laurel as the president. This government is known as the Second Philippine Republic. On October 20th, 1944, Allied forces headed by General Douglas MacArthur landed on the island of Leyte in order to liberate the Philippines from the Japanese, and on September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese formally surrendered. After liberation, the Commonwealth government of the Philippines was restored and Congress convened at its first regular session on July 9th, 1945. Elections for the Third Commonwealth were held on April 23, 1946, where Manuel Roxas won, becoming the last president of the Philippine Commonwealth. The Commonwealth era formally ended when the United States granted independence to the Philippines as scheduled on July 4, 1946, marking the beginning of the U.S.-Filipino diplomatic relations. And since then, the United States and the Philippines have signed more than 100 agreements, conventions, and treaties. Since February of 2023, the Philippine government has allowed for the construction of 4 new military bases in the Philippines as part of an enhanced defense cooperation agreement.
As President Biden has made clear, America's commitment to the defense of the Philippines, we discussed expanding the enhanced defense cooperation agreement, which allows our forces to operate together more efficiently from key sites across the Philippines. And we're pleased to announce today that President Marcos has approved 4 new EDCA locations.
And this move is widely viewed as a means to deter China's influence through the region of Southeast Asia.
And that brings the total number of EDCA sites to 9. And these efforts are especially important as the People's Republic of China continues to advance its illegitimate claims in the West Philippine Sea.
My concluding remarks. Despite previous tensions between the U.S. and the Philippines, both nations have decided to continue strengthening their diplomatic relations. Without the presence of U.S. military aid and training in the Philippines, other countries such as China would not offer to make a deal with them, but rather forcefully take their labor. Plus, to only the benefit of China use the pivotal strategic positioning of the Philippines and its crossroads of major shipping lanes, such as the South China Sea and Sulu Sea, to further the goal of Chinese expansionism. The U.S. Navy provides a critical role in the defense of the Philippines through the West Philippine Sea. Without such military and maritime support, there certainly would be an overwhelming presence of the Chinese Communist Party and attempts to occupy the archipelagos of the Philippines. In return for the defense and security, beneficial economic trade relations, education and influence of democracy that the U.S. offers, the Philippines is a frontline partner in countering terrorism in Southeast Asia, offers economic support for American businesses. Overall, the diplomatic relations shared between both nations fosters stronger cultural connections, which in any case maintaining an amicable diplomatic relationship of any sort results, in most times, better future. It may be easy to ponder the idea that if the relationship between the U.S. and Philippines never in the first place began, then possibly it would not make much a difference to everyday living within the US. However, envision the outcome of America not occupying the Philippines and not providing militaristic support so that it may defend itself against enemies foreign and domestic, and not partnering together to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, and not mutually benefiting from economic partnership. I think overall, the relationship shared diplomatically between the US and the Philippines benefits both nations and many more, since the deterrence of a communist nation typically is a net positive. A thought-provoking question is, if communism is as promising as how communist nations make it sound, then why wouldn't the Philippines partner with China and not the US? I think it is commonplace for intelligentsia within Western democracies to overlook the atrocities committed under communist rule by the likes of authoritarian leaders and dictators around the world. The outcome of this watered-down version campaign of communism has resulted in the manipulation of many young college students into believing communism is good, and that it has been utilized by the wrong people. And to give credit to Lenin, those who believe with fervor in communism are the true useful idiots, a term attributed to Lenin which refers to Westerners who were and who have been duped into supporting or excusing the atrocities of the Soviet Union. Do you think communism is good or bad? Let me know down in the comment section. Also, what country do you think I should cover next? Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.